And so today we are talking about setting boundaries. And I'm excited about this topic because I think this is something that is a repeated cycle. Like we go through this a lot. We think we've set enough boundaries, and then as your life grows and your experience changes or whatever, then you find out that you need to set more boundaries. And what I found difficult for me, when you grow up with abandonment issues and there is some level of emotional abuse, no matter who it comes from, um, and you're not receiving the love and the care and the nurturing that you expect should automatically come from people who share your life with you, or those folks who are assigned to you. Okay. Um, when you are traumatized by that, or maybe for me, conditioned to believe that, okay, this is how it's supposed to be because this is how it's always been. When you get to a point where you see other folks, well, when I saw other folks setting boundaries, meaning you can't say that, you can't do that, I'm not comfortable with it, I was like, oh, wow, is that allowed? Because if my greatest fear is to be alone, then I will compromise what is healthy for me, even though I know it's toxic and I see the red flag, simply because I don't want to be by myself. And so I'm hoping today that you can help us clarify what setting boundaries is, what it is not, and why we have so much difficulty setting boundaries with other people and with ourselves.
So when I was thinking, first of all, thank you for having me. I absolutely love this topic. It is my favorite thing to talk about with my clients because I feel like it sets the foundation for so many things with us. When I was thinking about how I wanted to kind of go with this conversation today, I was like, well, let me look up what the actual definition of a boundary is. And it just is a line that marks the limit of an area, a dividing line. And so when I was like that, it sounds so simple, but it can be so difficult for people to establish or even identify what that looks like. Um, and I think the first thing that needs to be said is that boundaries will look differently depending on who is setting them. So a boundary that works for me may not work for you, and vice versa. It really honestly has to frame how you are feeling. You touched on something very important. Not everyone in your life is going to be able to accept the boundary that you set. A lot of the people that seem to have the boundaries we set are the ones that need them the most. And that tends to, unfortunately, be people who are the closest to us, family, friends, various loved ones in whatever capacity. They seem to be the ones that need boundaries the most. I used to joke and say that if you looked at the word boundaries in the dictionary, you would see like family in parentheses because that's who seems to need them the most because those are the ones that seem to feel entitled to your yes all the time. They seem to feel entitled to having full access to things that maybe they don't need to have access to because it's not always the safest. Um, they sometimes can be the individuals who don't know their own limits when it comes to respecting yours. So not everyone will understand or like your boundaries, but it's okay for you to continue to set them regardless. And so just wanting to talk about what that looks like and the various areas that can fall into. I early on I realized this is probably not going to be an isolated conversation. I actually might have to expand this for like the spring or summer because boundaries is such a big topic and it kind of goes into like people pleasing, which is that's a whole section by itself. So to not overwhelm, I did want to start with like a little motivation, a little bit of motivation. So there was a time when you weren't wrestling with how to set a boundary, how to kind of navigate that, how to when to kind of implement it because you weren't setting them. And so even though it may feel a little bit uncomfortable, even though there's a little bit of struggle, you are still present. You're still in the ring. You're still doing it. You're still attempting to do something for yourself that will protect your feelings your emotions, your thoughts, and even though it's challenging, it's okay. And so I want to be able to let people know that sometimes setting boundaries can be very uncomfortable, but I've been challenging people and myself recently to sit in that discomfort and identify why it feels uncomfortable. And a lot of times setting a boundary feels uncomfortable because we are not familiar with it, or we feel guilty for setting them, or we feel selfish. Um, so yeah, I'm so ready to like jump into this because I feel like if it could resonate with one person to be able to feel a little bit more secure with how they are feeling or how they're navigating certain relationships in their life. Because like I said, boundaries stretch. There's work boundaries, there's emotional, mental boundaries, there's sexual boundaries, there's physical boundaries, there's financial boundaries, there's so much that we don't realize. And a lot of times I've also noticed that people are setting boundaries and don't even realize it's a boundary. They don't even realize that they're already doing it because they haven't identified the actual word with it. Um, so yeah, yeah.
I have found that in relationships, whether it would be with family, you said something very key, whether it's with family or, you know, with your significant other, that sometimes they're very offended that you want to set boundaries with them because they feel entitled. And especially those who you've been assigned to. Okay, so it's not like you can really get away from these jokers. It's like we are family, we assign with good, better, and different. And there are just some things that I'm not going to entertain anymore.
Mhm.
And not only am I not going to entertain it, if that's what you want to do, I support your decision to do what's best for you. But I'm gonna have to ghost you on this one. And they get really upset. I remember seeing this meme or a graphic, I guess. Yeah, because I don't know which is which. Is a meme something on Facebook that has to have a real person?
Yes.
Okay, so I saw a graphic then, and it was a picture of a butterfly and not a child. What is a butterfly before it's a caterpillar?
Caterpillar.
Caterpillar, and they were having lunch. And the caterpillar was like, wow, you sure have changed. And the butterfly was like, that's what we're supposed to do. And I never forgot that because some folks don't want to grow. And the expectation is that if I'm not going to grow, you can't either. And when you do, I'm going to let you know that I have a problem with it. But don't poke the bear, because when you do that, I'm trying to be a new person with these new healthy boundaries. Please don't take me back to, don't pull me out of retirement. So
Right.
But people do feel very entitled when it comes to setting boundaries, and they're offended simply because you want to grow and you want to protect your space.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It's about protecting your space. It's so funny. And I told her I was going to call her out on this. I was talking to my mom and she brought up to me, do you remember when you first set a boundary with me? And I was like, yes, I do. I don't remember the entire context of what it was, but it was just something that I couldn't do, something I was not able to do. And I said, Mom, I'm sorry. I'm not able to do that. I don't have the time or whatever it was. And she said, what? I don't like that you told me no. I don't even know how to handle that. And we laugh about it now because it's like she was really upset because she felt entitled to just always hearing yes or finding a way. And just at that time, I was not able to do it. And now I have to say, I'm so proud of her because she has come a long way on her boundary respecting, where I can set it, I can say something, and it's just respected. And she was so supportive of this topic because she was like, oh, this is something you love to talk about. And I said, yes, because it protects me. If my boundaries protect me, just like your boundaries protect you. And what I've realized is that it's so important to be around people who respect those boundaries that we set. And that when they don't, because you shouldn't have to constantly have to reaffirm your boundaries with someone. And when you do, that shows that there's a lack of respect and there's disregard for your feelings, because a lot of people are more focused on what works for them and kind of completely just disregarding the fact that it doesn't work for you. And then we feel very selfish, or we feel guilty for saying, no, I can't do this. I'm worn out, or I don't have the time, or I don't have the space, or I don't have the money, or whatever it is, simply because we love and care for somebody. And so being able to be in those safe spaces where people respect that you are not able to do. Because what I've also realized is that if you can't do something for someone and it needs to be done, they will figure it out. They will figure it out and kind of identify a new plan. But if you're constantly like people pleasing and trying to just say yes, yes, yes to everything, and then it doesn't work for you, they're not going to change. You have to be the one to change, because this has been working for them. I see you responding over there.
Oh, wow. So as a parent of young adult folks, everyone wants to be grown until adulting tires them out. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, what do I do? And what I found was that I was married when I had my children, but I found myself a single parent in the marriage and after the divorce. So I didn't know anything else other than being a single parent, again, while married and then after the divorce. So it was something that shocked me, that I had to ask my then husband to babysit our children if I had to go out and do something, because the expectation was that wherever I went, they were supposed to go. And so when that marriage didn't work out, I was already used to functioning, doing everything. And I forgot along the way, or I can't even say I forgot, I didn't even know that I was supposed to be teaching them life skills.
Yep.
They watched me pay the bills. They watched me run the household. They watched me, my frustration. They watched me just give, because it was easier to give them what they needed so that I could get extra rest. It was just easier to just overcompensate so that I could feel better with not really having to be the teacher all the time, because I was still trying to learn things that weren't taught to me. And when they got older and they still expected me to step in and save the day, because that's all I had ever shown them. And then I said the boundary, like, oh, no. See, because I'm healing and you're grown. And the response that they gave me was one that I did not appreciate, but it was one that I had groomed them to give. And I had to work through that. I said, wow, is it fair for me to call them ungrateful when I set the atmosphere? I do everything. I'm not, is it fair for me to say that they're spoiled when I set that atmosphere? No one kind of taught them that, and I did not, again. So I take full responsibility for not letting them know the cutoff date. Like the minute you told me you were grown, you were out there doing what grown folks do, then at that point, what you saw me doing is now the expectation for you. They didn't know that. And so setting that boundary with them came with a lot of yelling, cussing, and fussing, and then confession and repentance. And that cycle was just repeated over and over and over and over again, and until I found the courage to sit down with them and ask, what is it that, well, first, let me apologize for not teaching you the life skills that maybe you needed to be a healthy adult, because I did everything because I just wanted to make sure that nothing was undone. But now that I'm healing and I'm growing with my own stuff, what I can't do is allow you to keep blaming me for things that I gave you the best that I had. And then it was at that moment that I realized that my parents gave me the best that they had. And then I said, this boundary thing, it's reoccurring, it's a cycle, and you have to continue to remind people that's not where we were. That's yesterday. That's not today. So I'm willing to help you grow as I help myself grow.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But while you were talking, I was like, there's like 3 boundaries that you were setting before you even realized that they were boundaries. Like even that acknowledgement and that accountability for you to say, do I have the right to call them spoiled or anything when I haven't set the tone of what it needs to look like now? Do I, and the fact that that was reaffirmed for so long, like mommy will do everything. Mommy's got it. I got it. Like I got like a million things on my plate, but you got one more thing that you need to, I got it. Like being able to be accountable to say, you know what, that doesn't work anymore. That doesn't work anymore. And it's my responsibility as their mom to show them what this boundary needs to look like for me. That's a boundary. That was a boundary before you even realized what that was. And then again, after teaching them and making sure that they got it, expecting them to hold themselves accountable to move along with this boundary. That's a boundary. And so that's why I was saying boundaries can look so different for so many people because they can be just things that we're probably already doing that we do not understand or realize are actual boundaries that we're setting. And then what I've noticed is that once you can identify it, it's hard to ignore it. So once you identify that something needs to shift, that something doesn't feel right, it's hard to ignore it. It's hard to, especially when it comes to like those people pleasing tendencies, feeling like you have to do something just because you want to keep the peace, you're walking on eggshells, you don't want to upset anybody. As a former people pleaser myself, I recognize, and that's why boundaries are so important to me because I never had them before. And I realized how that was affecting me, my mental health, and just the relationships that I had with people. And so now, and not that I don't still struggle with those things because I'm human and I'm allowing myself to be human and extending grace to myself. But now I recognize when something feels uncomfortable. Like, have you ever been asked to do something and you're like, yeah, yes, I could do that. And then afterwards, the person is like, okay, so they can do that. They can show up or whatever. And then you're like, I wish I wouldn't have said yes. And then as it continues to build, you're having this anxiety now, which is something we spoke about before, of I don't want to do this. I don't feel like this. And I've already agreed. So now I feel obligated to do so. But that's something you have to be very mindful of those cues, those social cues within yourself. If there's something that you are comfortable doing, once you agree to it, it's solidified. You won't be feeling regret and doubt and just dreading having to do something. That's a people pleasing tendency because you've now agreed to do something that benefits somebody else, but you never checked in with yourself to say, does this even work with my schedule? Does this work with my emotional capacity that I have right now? Like you never checked in with yourself before you decided to give an answer. Because a lot of times with having a lack of boundaries, we don't realize that we have the absolute right to say, can I think about that? Not even can I. I'm going to think about that. I'm going to let you know and give somebody like a time frame. So I'm going to think about this and I will let you know by the end of the week. It allows them to have, and that's just a boundary. It allows them to have something to look forward to, but also showing that you are not going to just be impulsive and just give an answer until you've thought about if you're able to actually commit to it. But that sounds so simple, but it can be so hard to grasp. So if somebody is able to even use that little line that I just said, it helps because I've done it. And it can feel uncomfortable in the very beginning. I will not say that I'm not sometimes shaking inside when I'm setting a boundary, but I'm still doing it because I realize that it's absolutely needed. And people will be surprised. People will be like, oh, like I thought you were going to answer right away. I thought you were going to be able to do this or that you. And it's like, no, I'm going to think about it. I'm going to see if it works in my schedule. I'm going to check in my schedule, however you frame it, and I will get back to you. That's a boundary. And it's okay. And it's absolutely necessary for you to be able to give yourself the time because you're not entitled to say yes. You're not entitled to always be on for other people when you haven't checked in to make sure that you yourself are okay before you decide to be an extension for other people. That's a boundary.
Ooh, that's good. And one thing that I found is that the minute, because the no is a complete sentence, N-O period is a complete sentence.
Complete sentence.
And if you don't accept the N-O, I can K-N-O-W, I can let you know why.
I said I need to find a shirt that says no is a complete sentence, because
Yes.
I say that all the time. And then I will also say, people, when you say no, they want to, why can't you do this? Why is it? And it's like, because I'm not able to.
Yeah.
You don't have to offer. So you can, if you feel like it's necessary, to offer an explanation. But if you do not feel like there needs to be one, because then once again, if you're saying no and somebody is consistently asking why, they're saying it because they're not comfortable with it. It's not about you, it's about them.
Right.
So if you are extending grace to decide to continue with the conversation and say, this is why, that's great. If you feel like you don't need to, because then it's like, this person is not respecting the fact that you just said no, that you just set a boundary, because it doesn't work for them. But a boundary is not for other people, it's for you to be able to manage in that relationship. And so I found myself, when I first started saying no, giving so many explanations as to why I couldn't. And then I felt completely worn out giving the explanation when I just said no in the first place.
Yeah.
I said, you know what, that was me having to be accountable to say, you're not respecting your own boundaries.
Wow.
You can't expect somebody else to. So I always tell clients, yes, a boundary is necessary with people, but if you don't set one with yourself first, that's the first part. If you don't set it with yourself first, nobody else is going to be able to even respect it, understand it, or even try to learn it if you don't understand it, respect it, and learn it yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's a good segue right into setting those personal boundaries. You know, I can remember, now I did not grow up in the church, right? You know, so I did not when I was introduced to going to the building, having fellowship, I was coming out of being Muslim. So I had a whole different perspective on life, but I was learning.
Right.
And what I recognized was that all of the promises that we were hearing about being preached or being taught or being prophesied, a lot of people were missing the blessing of what they were hearing simply because they weren't setting personal boundaries. So if God promises you whatever it is, so say for instance, in the area of finances, if God promises you, you know, an abundant life, however we define that, if we can't stay out of Ross or Marshall's or Home Goods, that's me, you know, because I don't know how many pretty dishes I need, and so anyway, that's a whole other thing. But we have to set boundaries so that we can receive the promises that God has made for us. That's just in one area. But then too, when you're in a relationship and when we initially agree to something at the beginning, and then at some point midway, we say, yeah, yo, this isn't working for me. We have to have a conversation, I believe, with the person so that they can know, I'm kind of moving away from that. I know this is what we used to do at the beginning, but it's not really meshing with who I am now. And so I no longer want to do that with you. And we have to be ready for the offense, because even though something's healthy for us, is always an offense to someone else. And even when it comes even to the things of God, like I said, God can say you have to have a healthy boundary, because if not, you're not going to see the promises. And in your spiritual walk, you're always going to be frustrated because you haven't set a personal boundary. You haven't told your flesh no. So when you don't tell your flesh no, you're like all over the place, because we want that instant gratification. A boundary says you can't always have that. If you're a student, you have to study, which means you can't always go out and get turned up. You have to turn down and study.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's a lot that comes with personal boundaries. So how do we get to a point where we're fighting addictions of many things, not just drug and alcohol, but it could be sexual, it could be, you know, lying, gossiping, overspending, whatever it is, but we're fighting these addictions that we have allowed to become a part of who we are. We said, come on in. Yo, come on in, have a seat. You want a drink? What we doing? You know, all of that. And then when self says, okay, I want my life to be better, how do we work it so that those personal boundaries actually are long lasting and not something we have to continuously get to the end of the line to learn?
That is a great question. So with the personal boundaries, at least from a personal perspective, and then I started to see that I could probably put that out for clients when working, and they could try to kind of make it be their own. So when it comes to like personal relationships, whether it's like romantic or just family or friends or anything, I started with what didn't work in those past relationships. You know, when we start to think about how to set personal boundaries with ourselves, you have to have some type of foundation. And so I have started and then started to challenge clients once I was able to get a hang of it, that it starts with what didn't work before. So I would ask people like, well, what kind of boundaries do you want to set? And they would say, well, I don't know. And it's like, well, let's identify what didn't work before. So in a past relationship, knowing that you were maybe emotionally or physically or sexually abused or financially abused, because that's a whole other thing. Knowing that there was something that was happening in that relationship that did not feel good, that felt very uncomfortable, that felt very unsafe. It's like that is your boundary now, because it's like, I'm never going to allow that to just be okay or make it a rationalization for someone else's behavior, someone else's choice. Sometimes things happen where we don't know until we know better. And so being able to say, I was in a relationship where someone just continually talked down to me and it was emotionally abusive and they really messed up my self-esteem. Then getting into a new relationship when you feel ready, when you have allowed yourself to heal, to say, this is not something that I'm going to tolerate moving forward. And so when something feels off, I'm going to speak up about it because I realize where I can go and I realize that I'm not willing to take myself there anymore. So starting from that standpoint of realizing like what didn't work for you. I don't think we often like tap into what we didn't tap into.
That's your cat?
No, my plug came out. I'm like, no, they're not around. Oh no, that's a boundary. They're not allowed to be around when I'm trying to do what I need to do. So, you know, just realizing kind of like what the standpoint of like what didn't work before. Sometimes, and I know this is like a topic for like a later time, but even when it comes to sexual trauma and things like that, it's like a lot of times I've seen clients blame themselves. I should have, could have, would have, did this, and making it excuses for someone else's behavior, someone else's choice. Then having the boundary to say, I'm going to take control of my story. I'm going to be able to share my boundary. I'm going to be able to share my story, and I'm going to share it when I feel ready to share it. Not everybody else thinks I'm supposed to share it, because people will say, well, why didn't you talk up? Why didn't you say something? Why? And it's like, because this is when I'm saying it. This is when I'm deciding that it's safe for me to share a boundary. And so being able to realize maybe what didn't work before, and then using that as the platform for how to set those boundaries. Because what is important is that we start to tap into what feels uncomfortable and stop dismissing our own feelings just because we want other people to feel comfortable, just because we don't want to like rattle things or walk on eggshells or whatever. It's like we walk on eggshells because we don't want to rattle the cage or upset someone. Rattle the cage, because guess what? You know what happens when you continue to do what you're doing and it doesn't work for you. Rattle the cage. Because at the end of the day,
that's a t-shirt, rattle the cage. Yes.
Listen, that must be good because I don't even know where that came from. I've never said that.
We go into the t-shirt business. Yes.
Yeah. We already got two ideas. We already have two ideas. Like rattle it, because at the end of the day, it's you sitting in that discomfort, identifying why it's uncomfortable, and being able to move to the other side. Because you realize where you're coming from has not worked for you. And it can't just continue to be about other people's needs when you completely dismiss your own and then expect people to respect your feelings. You're not respecting your own feelings.
Yeah.
You're not respecting your own feelings. So starting there, as far as the personal aspect, speaking up even when it feels, and you can practice. I've practiced my boundary conversation, like, and okay, so this is what I know I need to say. This is how I don't, and I need to make sure that it comes across in a way where I'm being heard and somebody's not shutting down, because and also reminding myself, you are allowed and entitled to speak your truth. You are allowed and entitled to speak what is feeling uncomfortable for you. It's, it's honestly been one of the biggest um, gifts in my relationship with my fiance, to be able to say, hey, this doesn't feel comfortable. Let's talk about this. And being able to then prepare yourself for someone else's boundary, for someone else's truth. You know, that's a boundary within itself. Being like, I have this to say, and then having to prepare yourself to hear what the other person has to say. It's a boundary about being respectful. And so it's just, but it does no good to be able to hold back on the things that don't work for you. That is not God's best for you. And that's what I started to realize during this pandemic, of all places, what God's best was for me, and holding firm to my boundaries, because I had some really rigid boundaries during this pandemic. And if it showed me nothing else, it was important for me to stand in my truth.
Wow. That's, yeah. And we have to really, for me, I had to recognize that I even deserve to have them, because when you come from a place of where you have suffered some kind, I think we have all suffered some kind of a trauma, some more than others, some are more resilient than others immediately, some it takes a while, and then we live with all these triggers. And so when I learned in Romans 12:2, it says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by the testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. What I recognize with that is I deserve to have boundaries, because the God who I worship says that I am allowed to. Now, that means that it doesn't happen because there's some type of magic dust, fairy dust, that's gonna, come out, or I gotta go on a hunt for an elusive unicorn. Like, it's nothing like that. It is simply, I have to live disciplined, and I have to recognize that there's a part that I played in allowing people to treat me the way that they treat me, and they feel comfortable with doing it because I gave them space to do it. Oh, come on in.
Yep.
Come on in. I'm doormat. How are you? What happens then when you recognize, no, I'm not a doormat, but I'm a gatekeeper to my emotional and spiritual wellness. Then it's like, well, you mean to tell me I got to call before I come over? I can't just borrow money and not pay it back. No, those days are over. Okay.
Yes,
those days are over. And so it comes to a point where, for me, I had to recognize that what I was thinking, for the most part, was unhealthy. So I had to exchange it for something else. And then once I believed the truth, I gave the lie away and I believed the truth. Then I had to have the courage to set the boundaries and see where the dust was going to fall. Because like you said, people are not happy when you grow beyond what you've allowed them to be comfortable with doing.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's in the Anderson DNA, but I don't have a whole lot of time to really be explaining to you why it is what it is. I said what I said, please move on, and you're going to get over it. And if you don't, oh, okay, but I recognize that I have to have a conversation with people. That's tiring.
Yes.
You feel what I'm saying? Because you have to have these conversations with a lot of people in different areas of your life.
Yep.
I'm trying to get to work, take my medication, go to sleep, earn my coin, pay my bills. I don't have time for all these conversations. So sometimes that's when you realize that the boundaries that you recognize you need to set, we were not diligent in etching them in stone. We kind of wrote it with a pencil And when we got tired, it was erased. And then we had to have the conversation again. And so there you have it. What about the area of procrastination? How do we set personal boundaries in the areas of procrastination?
That is a great question. Well, first of all, yes, I think it is in the Anderson DNA. It is definitely part of our makeup to just be like, it is what it is. I said what I said, and you will be okay, be blessed. But as far as procrastination goes, I think it honestly starts with holding yourself accountable. Like, if you know that there's something that needs to be done that has an expiration date, you know, if I don't set the time, if I don't set because it's about setting intentional time to do stuff. If I don't set this intentional time to hold myself accountable to get this done, first of all, it's going to start creating some anxiety because you're going to have it in the back of your head, like, I got to get this done. I got to do this. I got to do this. And it feels unnerving. And I don't know about you, but I feel very unsettled when I know something needs to be done and I'm continuously putting it off. And it's like, if you just did it, if you just set the time to do it. But I think it's also like a mind thing, training your mind to say, this is what I need to do. This is important to me. This is me prioritizing something for myself and starting to feel comfortable to do that. Because if you don't feel comfortable to prioritize yourself, put yourself first, or do something for yourself, then you're not going to be able to like reduce that procrastination. You're just going to keep putting stuff off.
Yes.
So it's about saying, I deserve to. For example, I knew that I wanted to prepare. Like, I know to talk about boundaries. It's fine. Like, I talk about it every day, but wanting to still make sure that I have the intentional time to prepare how I kind of wanted to bring boundaries up today. Mm-hmm. And so saying, okay, this week, the last couple of weeks has been just chaotic, but I know that I want to be able to get these points across. Setting the intentional time to not procrastinate and say, I deserve to sit down and write out the things that I want to bring forth to other people to help somebody else. So, and also it's a boundary for me. It was my boundary to talk about boundaries. It was a boundary for me to not procrastinate and do that. So I think at first it's a mind thing. It's like training your mind to feel like you are worth it. It is, your priority is worth it to get it done and make the intentional time. And if that takes you away from being able to watch your favorite show or show up for somebody else in that moment or do whatever, it's like, that's okay. Mm-hmm. Life will still be okay if you take some time to be intentional about the things that you need to get done for yourself. To not procrastinate, to not bring about something else like anxiety, because you know that something needs to be done and you know it has an expiration date like lunch meat and you're still not doing what you need to do. It's like just making that time. But we have to start being more intentional.
Yeah.
And stop brushing it off as if it's not important.
Right.
I can get this done. Oh, I can do this in 5 minutes. Well, if you can do it in 5 minutes, then do it. Then do it.
Do it. Yes, right.
Then do it. So yeah, that is just, it's about being intentional, making that intentional time, and also saying, I deserve to make this time for myself. I always say 24 hours in a day, we can dedicate at least an hour to ourselves. Mm-hmm. It can't be about everything and everybody else. It can't be about the minute that we wake up, we're helping individuals or whatever for everybody else, and then you have nothing for yourself. So you know that you have something that is on a deadline, whether it's work or personal, or just even saying, I need to make the time for my self-care, whatever that is, not pushing it off because you can do it in 5 minutes. It's like, okay, well, then make the time. Show yourself, because remember I said the boundaries start with ourselves. Show yourself that you are a priority, that it is important, and it needs to get done for you.
Right, that is right. And even in the areas of, so we talked about our finances, we've talked about relationships, and we've talked about procrastination, anxiety, you touched on. In the areas of our health, we have to recognize that we are responsible for, because this falls into the line of self-care. When we have health issues, we have a responsibility, not only to ourselves and for the people who we're assigned to, and then those folks who we invite to come along, but we are responsible to God to do the best that we can to maintain a healthy temple. That means that you take your medication the way that you're supposed to, you eat the way that you're supposed to, you get up and you exercise. You know, sometimes small things turn into things that can overwhelm you when you have only lived in with a thinking of, yeah, I rather just take this pill and just, you know, come on, you know, and we want everyone else to be accountable, but then the prayer is, Lord, help me. And the Lord is saying, I am helping you. The doctor, I allow the doctor to have the knowledge to give you the list of what you need to do. So when you are, you know, praying for good health, lay off on the fatty food, get up and exercise. Even if I walk with a cane on most days, because I have nerve damage in my feet. So I had no feeling in the bottom of my feet. So I had to learn how to walk again, because one day I was able to feel my feet and walk. The very next day I was not. So I had to go through that, and the doctors cannot identify what it is. They thought it was neuropathy. Then they said, nope, it's not that. Now they're looking at my spine and a whole lot of other things. I have a lot of other issues that go on. What is my responsibility? To get up and exercise, not to just sit. If we're sitting all day long, that's a problem. Because if we're not doing anything but moving around our house, we need to be in movement so that our limbs can get what it is that they need and the blood can flow. We need to take our medication the way it's prescribed. We need to eat the way that we're supposed to eat. Go to the dentist when you're supposed to go. So self-care and taking care of yourself and personal boundaries, because if you don't take care of your health, it's probably, how are you going to be healthy enough to take care of anything else?
Absolutely.
And so, yeah.
Absolutely. It starts with you. If you are not taking care of yourself, if you're not making sure that you're getting what you need, putting the things in your body that you need to be able to feel like you're able to do your daily functioning, then you're doing a disservice to yourself, and you're not respecting the boundaries of your body, you know. And so, and that can be hard. It can be hard. It's like, okay, well, I know I have this to do. I have to get up. I gotta take my medicine. I gotta get ready for it's a lot. It can be a lot.
Yeah.
But it's also like going back to, I deserve to be able to try to feel like my best self today. So if taking my medicine is going to help with that, if taking a shower is going to help with that, if getting dressed, going to work, if that's going to help with me feeling like I'm showing up for myself, that's a boundary with yourself. And it's not always easy. I will be the first one to say it's not always easy, but it is so gratifying to say, I did this for me. I didn't do this for anybody else. I did this for me. And if that's how people have to start framing it, where it's like, oh my goodness, I'm taking like 10 or 12 pills a day. It's like, if that is what is going to allow me to be able to get through 8 hours of my day, then that's what I need. That's my personal toolkit that I'm going to use to be able to show up for myself in a way that I can get the things I need to get done, so that I can feel like I prioritize my needs before I made everybody else's needs important as well.
Yeah.
But it's a challenge. And so extend grace to yourself, because it's not always easy. We are human. And sometimes we just don't have it. We just don't have that energy. But even showing up for this conversation today, that's a boundary that people set with themselves, to say, I'm going to schedule out some time to hear something that I may need to hear. I'm going to allow something to be said that possibly can resonate, so that I can utilize it for myself and for my relationships in my life. Those are boundaries. And so that's also showing up for your health, your mind, your spirit, your soul. Like it's showing up for yourself, but extending grace to yourself, that if you're able to only get certain things done for your mind and body today, then you did it. You did more than you probably thought you were going to be able to do. That's a boundary.
Yeah. I know my doctor helped me understand it, because you fall into a depression sometimes as your health changes, you get older. And if you are dealing with health challenges that are going to, like, there's no cure for some things that we deal with now. There is a cure for some things. You know, like my doctor said to me, you know, with your type 2 diabetes, it is not your fault that, like, some people have this misunderstanding that people who have type 2 diabetes ate their way into it. That's not true, because you have many people who overeat and they don't get diabetes, right?
Yes.
But for whatever reason, that trait is in me. And so, but if you want to come off the insulin, if you want to come off taking the pill, then this has to be your diet. Now, so the boundary is I have to want to accept that.
Yeah.
But if I don't stay out of
Yeah.
Popeyes, if I don't stop, girl, if I don't stop, you know, if I don't stop all this other stuff, it doesn't work.
Right. Right.
And a healthy boundary is not, I would prefer to take the medication simply because it will help me do what I don't feel like doing. No. My doctor told me with the, I call it neuropathy because they don't know what to call it, the nerve damage that I have in my feet.
Mm-hmm.
I still have to make sure that blood gets to my feet. The easiest thing to do is, well, if I can't feel you, okay, I'm just gonna sit here and not, but I still have to exercise my feet. I still have to do these things. It's necessary. If I can't stand because of what the arthritis, the bone arthritis that I have, then I have to do chair exercises. I gotta, you know, do what you gotta do from the chair, but you make it work. We don't show up for ourselves. That doesn't help depression. It doesn't help us survive depression. How we survive depression is setting healthy boundaries that I'm going to get up out of the bed, take care of my hygiene, you know, even if I'm not going anywhere, I'll put on, you know, if you can only dress from the waist up, because that's what, child, listen, because I can't, because I've had.
Oh, listen. Oh, I got my pajama pants on too. So listen. But we're here.
But we're here, and we look presentable to the. You feel what I'm saying? And so the boundary is always, setting boundaries is always going to have to be a priority in every area of life.
What I will say is, even being an entrepreneur, you are not entitled to respond 24 hours a day to anybody. It's a business, just like any other business. And if you go to Starbucks at a certain time, they close. And guess what? If you want to go get something from there, you have to go when the business hours are available, when the store is open. Same thing with Home Goods. The same, well, not Wawa, but the same thing with Home Goods. But it's just like, you just because you have a business, your business is thriving because you are setting it in a structured way that you need it to go. And that's where like that work boundary comes in, because it's like, just because someone sends you a message at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, doesn't mean that they deserve a response at 1:15 in the morning. They can get a response between the hours of whatever time you start, from 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 or whatever the case is. It doesn't change just because you're an entrepreneur. And making sure you hold that boundary with yourself to say, these are my business hours. And a lot of people will even say, I will respond in a 24-hour period or whatever the case is. Being able to stand firm in that and feeling okay and saying, I'm prioritizing myself, because yes, even though this is your business, you have a life completely outside of this. And it's important and okay for you to nourish that part of your life, while people will wait. Because if they really want the product, they will wait to get a response, and then you guys can go from there. But you are not entitled to respond just because someone else feels like they need it right then, right there. An emergency on their part is not one on yours. Amen. They will be able to fall in line with the structure that you're setting, with the boundary that you're setting for your business.
That's right. Chaplain Myra Carter, do you have anything that you would like to add?
No, this is wonderful. I enjoyed everything. This has just been awesome.
Oh, I'm so glad.
But when the procrastination thing popped up, I said, "Oh." All right, God bless everybody.
God bless you
God
too.
bless you too. I want to help some folks that walk with God, and because sometimes, well, the Word of God tells us that we are to be, we are to sacrifice, for others, and we should be there to help one another. So how do we honor our faith, but not compromise? Well, how do we honor ourselves and not compromise what we believe in our faith? I guess that's the way it should be said. Because I have had some people say to me, well, you're saying no and you're a Christian. Well, yeah, because Christians get tired. And,
Yes.
I think even when we set healthy boundaries, what we have to recognize is there's always going to be a level, a space where it feels like our boundaries are being compromised. But we have to bend and be flexible to have wisdom to know that even boundaries, though they're good and they're etched in stone. See, I don't even know how to word it because it just seems so absolute. But there have been times when I have set boundaries, like I'm going to at 9 o'clock. Anything ministry related. I pray that I've taught enough, and I pray that I have helped counsel you enough that if you have an issue at 9:01, you can see your way through. But then you get a text or a phone call and it is an emergency. And that boundary that I have set, that I'm going to stop at 9 o'clock p.m., it has to, I have to set it aside for a moment because there is an emergency. And I think that, and Chaplain Myra, I do see your hand, and I'll unmute you. I think that it would be helpful if you could help us, for those of us who lead in ministry, or those of us who, whether we lead in ministry or not, but we're trying to honor our faith. How do we not compromise, but find a healthy balance for the two?
So I think that's a great example, because yes, typically if there's something that could be answered the next day after 9 o'clock, that's what it is. That's your cutoff. But that doesn't have to extend to the emergency, and identifying what that emergency, like, if somebody's texting, because obviously if you're setting the boundary of after 9 o'clock, I'm not available. However, if it's an emergency, please let me, please, however that's framed. I think you can still hold a boundary by responding to an emergency, because you're not responding to every single thing. You're responding to like an immediate issue. So you can still hold your boundary and say, I'm not responding to like 10 things. I'm responding to one immediate thing that needs an absolute response right now. Mm-hmm. It's very time sensitive. Somebody's life is at stake in some capacity. Something needs to be, and so being able to set, because that's a boundary. You're saying, I realize that I need to show up for this person in this moment. I need to show up, but I'm not doing it for every single thing. I'm doing it for this one isolated thing. So I think that's where it kind of comes in. To give yourself grace, to not think that you're like not listening to your boundaries, because it's like, so in my field, I have a cutoff time, but if there's an emergency or there's something that comes up with someone's mental health, suicidal, some type of self-harming or whatever, that I'm done at 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, that can still be held, but this emergency needs that response. Right. So being able to say, I'm showing up for this person. And I honestly, I rely on prayer, because it's like, okay, well, maybe at 9 o'clock, you've given all that you feel like you can as an apostle. You've given all that you can in this point. It's like, Lord, equip me with what I need to do to be able to help this person get the answers or the solution that they need. Allow me, equip me with the words and the prayers and the actions that will align with you to help them, so that once that's done, I can go back into prioritizing myself. And now it's extended, because it's like, I've just held space outside of what I thought I was going to be doing. And so now I need to kind of refuel myself. So being able to identify, you are still able to hold a boundary, even if it's an emergency, you can be supportive and be, but I think it as far as like being a Christian, it's like you have an incredible teacher, the biggest sounding board, period. It's like, please equip me with what I need, because I thought I was done, like mentally, emotionally. So if this is coming to me, I know that it's not because I can't handle it. I just need you to help me handle it.
That's right.
You know, and so being able to do that, that's a boundary too. Being able to have those conversations, being able to feel comfortable to say, hey, God, I need you. Like, I don't know. And it could be something as quick as equip me with what I need in this moment for this person. I will give you the discernment to know what deserves that time, that energy outside of that designated boundary space that you set for your time. God will let you know. But it's important to be able to be in touch with that. It's important to be able to listen to that, because that's a boundary. Listening to God, which is a whole other conversation. That's a boundary, being able to say, okay, I've gotten this download from God and I'm okay. I can do what I need to do. Or if he's telling me to be still because this person may need to not rely on me to just fix, and they might need to learn what to do in this situation so that they're better equipped and can cope when this happens again.
Right.
Then listening to that, that's a boundary. So
Amen. This has been a great conversation. We are at the 12 o'clock mark, but we've covered so much. And again, like you said, this is a conversation that really is, it has different areas, you know, it's an ongoing conversation. But I think one things, my takeaway is that once you have identified the boundary, the responsibility that I have when I set a boundary is that I have to see it through.
I have so enjoyed this. I wanted to just leave you guys with just 3 little things that you can do when you're trying to set a boundary. The first one is just to be clear on the issue. Identify what that looks like for you, how it's making you feel, what is happening in that situation, just being very clear on the issue. The second one is just identifying the right approach. And a lot of times we don't know how to approach a situation with someone, and it comes off very defensive and it comes off very aggressive, and people will shut down. So one of the things that works is I statements. I feel like, I think that, I've been wondering, or whatever the case is, but you kind of are putting it on you, where you're identifying what the issue is, but you're not, you did this and you did that, and it allows people to shut down. So if you want someone to be a little bit more open and for it to not feel in an aggressive approach, whether it's at work or personal or whatever, being able to be clear on the issue and identifying the right approach to start using I statements is always a helpful one. The third one is keeping the focus on at task 1 and 2. Don't talk about something that happened 3 months ago. Stay clear on the issue. Now give that time for that issue if it's unresolved, but maybe identify a boundary that this may not be the right conversation to have this one, and be able to focus on what the actual act and task is at the time. I hope you were able to learn something, take something away, and realize that you are entitled to set a boundary. And I want to leave everybody with thinking about a boundary that needs to be set for yourself after this conversation. Identify how you need to go about it, be clear on it, and set it.